Welcome back to another episode of our Grown Up Bedtime Stories series. And right now, we're currently working our way through some deep history, faith, and the lives of those who came before us by journeying through the book by Ambroise Comeau, The Oldest Parish in Canada. This is the third episode in our series, and we'll explore the trials, tribulations, and unwavering spirit of the Catholic faithful in Old Acadia, particularly in the town of Port Royal through the 17th and 18th centuries. Let's set the scene. The year was 1704. The settlement of Port Royal had been left without a resident priest since the sacking of the village in 1690. For 14 long years, the faithful gathered as they could, served by missionary priests from other outposts who came to celebrate Mass in a dilapidated church. This small community clung to its faith, awaiting the guidance of a resident pastor. It was then that Father Justinian Durand, a Recollet Father, took charge of the parish, with Subercase serving as governor. The Recollet Fathers had initially built a monastery near the St. John the Baptist Church, which doubled as a rectory. However, in a cruel twist of fate, this building was burned to the ground in 1708. The Recollet Fathers sought to rebuild the monastery with funds received from the French government, a sum of £4,000. Yet the parishioners disagreed. They believed this money, granted for missionary work, should be used instead to build a rectory and a church for the parish priest. In a letter dated December 20, 1708, Subercase wrote of this malentendu, noting that while the monks desired to build a monastery, the people felt it was more prudent to build a church that could withstand the enemy's destruction and serve as a lasting place of worship. However, this dream was not to be. 2 years later, the English arrived at Port Royal. After a fierce battle, they claimed full possession of the colony and garrison, fortifying the area and renaming it Fort Anne in honor of the reigning monarch. With the English takeover, the Catholic population in Port Royal dwindled significantly. With no church and a governor hostile to their faith, the Catholics in the small town were forced to find new ways to practice their religion. At that time, many Acadians settled on farmland on both sides of the river. The English forbade them to assemble or hold church services. They were only permitted to gather for Mass in a nearby Aboriginal fort, which became a temporary refuge for worship. The faithful, resilient in their devotion, continued to gather at the fort, but they faced constant restrictions. Eventually, a new church was built across the river at Granville Ferry, allowing a larger group of Catholics from both the east and the west easier access to Mass. However, this would not be the last trial for this community. There was no permanent resident priest for many years. The faithful depended on occasional visits from missionaries and traveling priests. Around this time, a remarkable discovery occurred. A church bell was unearthed by a farmer plowing his field at Troops Point. The bell, filled with French gold coins, was taken to Church Point and used once again. The farmer, having enjoyed the unexpected bounty, fondly remembered this event for years to come. The Recollet Fathers had served the parish at Port Royal for 18 years, but they were forced to leave in 1755 when the Catholics were expelled from Annapolis and the surrounding areas. Life had become exceedingly difficult for these priests. Father de Poncy wrote to France, sharing how he was compelled to spend a winter in a farmhouse under undisclosed circumstances. Among the priests, Father Jean de Sinclaves was notable for his diplomatic nature. But despite his efforts, he faced many humiliations in his pastoral work. By 1753, he had taken charge of a mission at Palm Coupe, now Pubnico, but this too was not to last. On April 23, 1756, their village was attacked. Buildings were razed to the ground, animals slaughtered or stolen, and many fled into the woods to avoid the English invaders. Father Desinclaves recounted the harrowing scenes as he helped the faithful escape to safety. This marked an end of an era for the Catholic Church in Old Acadia. Despite their best efforts, the priests were unable to maintain a stable presence amidst constant upheaval. For over 25 years, the Catholics in Nova Scotia could not openly practice their religion or build places of worship. It was not until the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829 that Roman Catholics were granted civil and religious rights nearly equal to those of Protestants. With the passage of time, new settlers arrived in Annapolis Valley, largely loyalists invited by the British Crown to occupy the land vacated by the expelled Acadians. By 1783, 13,000 refugees had arrived, establishing new communities in Halifax, Annapolis, Port Roseway, and elsewhere. During this period, there were very few Catholics in Port Royal. Notable names such as Antoine Comeau, Jean Beliveau, and Charles Leblanc began to appear in records. By 1771, 67 Catholics of Acadian descent resided in Annapolis Royal, steadfastly maintaining their faith. The first priests to visit Port Royal after the expulsion were Father Bailey and Father Jones, who arrived in 1780. They made sporadic visits, bringing comfort to the scattered faithful. By 1799, Father Mansignon arrived from France to serve as the pastor for the Western Shore, extending his mission from Annapolis Royal to Cape Sable. He would journey to Annapolis to say Mass and administer sacraments to the remaining Catholics. Fast forward to May 1, 1832. The Catholic community finally purchased a piece of land to build a new church. Under the guidance of Father Lawler and a committee of 8 men appointed by Bishop Fraser of Halifax, the new St. Louis de France church was erected. The land cost £45, and the total cost of the church came to £145. For many years, this humble church served the mission without a resident priest. It wasn't until 1878 that Father Thomas Grace arrived and became the first officially named pastor of St. Louis Church. Father Grace, a small but strong man, spent his days praying, reading, and visiting the sick. His dedication to the parish was evident, and in his tireless efforts, often braving inclement weather to reach the faithful in far-flung areas. And under that guidance, the new parish grew, and a new church was eventually built in 1910. And that's the beautiful church I ring the bell at every single Sunday, and it's the honor of my life, truly. The story of the Catholic Church in Old Acadia, especially in Port Royal, is one of persistence, resilience, and faith. From the early days of missionary work, through the hardships of war, and into the rebuilding era, this community remains steadfast. Through our series on the oldest parish in Canada, we remember these stories not just as history, but as a living testament to faith, community, and unyielding spirit. Thank you for joining us tonight. May these stories inspire and strengthen your faith. Sleep well, dream deeply, and may God bless you. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will explore in greater detail the development of St. Louis Church in Annapolis Royal and the first priests who laid the foundation to make St. Louis the thriving church that it is today. Until next time, good night and God bless. The Faith Focus Network is a personal passion project created out of love for my faith and community. While I share stories and reflections related to the parish I attend or others, this content is entirely my own and has no official affiliation with any parish. The opinions and perspectives expressed are shared independently to inspire and encourage fellow believers. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope you find as much joy in listening as I do in creating each episode.